you hear good things.
It begins with a stench, not a whiff, not something you can wave away. This is the kind of smell that clings, the kind that follows you out of the room. A man walks into a train depot in Los Angeles. It's just past 7 a.m. A trunk has been sitting there, heavy, sealed, and weeping from the seams. He's not supposed to open it, but something's wrong. The station agent calls the police, and when they arrive, they break the lock. Inside, a woman, folded, wrapped in linen, and missing a hand. They find the second trunk an hour later. 2 more body parts, another woman, wrapped just the same. And just like that, Winnie Ruth Judd's name is on every front page in the country. But what no one agrees on, not then, not now, is what actually happened inside that little house on Brill Street. I'm Sidney Smith, and this is Murderous Podcast. And this week's murderess, again, is Winnie Ruth Judd. Part 2, 2 in the Trunk. October 18th, 1931, Los Angeles Union Station. It's a Sunday morning in Los Angeles. It's still early. The kind of quiet where even the pigeons seem subdued. A Southern Pacific train has just arrived from Phoenix, pulling into the station with the slow confidence of routine. 2 large trunks are offloaded by a porter. Standard black steamer trunks, common enough. But he notices right away something is wrong. They're heavier than expected. One is noticeably misshapen. And then there's the smell. Not overpowering, not yet, but wrong. A deep, sour scent, just under the surface, like meat left too long in the sun, masked with something sharp. The porter leans in cautiously. One of the trunks is leaking. Just a drop or two. Nothing dramatic. But he sees it hit the platform and pool. He flags his supervisor. The station agent steps in, peers at the luggage. Then they call for assistance. By the time the LAPD arrives, both trunks have begun to attract attention. The larger one, around 4 feet long, had its lid slightly warped, as if it had been forced shut. The smaller, matching trunk is intact, but equally heavy. The first theory is practical, a medical transport mistake, a cadaver for a university, maybe surgical waste. People whisper it might be something out of the medical examiner's office. But when the larger trunk is finally open, that theory collapses. Inside is the torso of a woman, legs curled unnaturally against it, folded to fit inside. The second trunk holds what's left: arms, sections of limbs, But the heads, only one. Whoever packed the trunks did so with the intent to separate, not just to conceal, but to arrange. Clothes are stuffed around the remains, maybe to cushion them, maybe to muffle the sound of movement, or maybe just to delay the smell. The detective on call that morning is plainclothes Lieutenant Frank Ryan. He's done time in homicide, but his beat is usually domestic calls, late night brawls at speakeasies. What he sees when that lid cracks open, it stops him cold. The heat inside the trunk escapes in a wave. It hits the face like a breath, thick and stale. He looks inside and sees not just death, but something far more intimate. The body had been handled, positioned. It wasn't dumped in haste. It was packed. Clothes stuffed around the limbs, folded. A scarf still wrapped loosely around the neck. Women's undergarments, some clean, some not. One high heel wedged against a thigh. The detective doesn't speak at first. No one does. When they open the smaller trunk, he turns his head before the smell finishes rising. One of the junior officer whispers, "It's a woman, or was." Another says, "There's only one head." Someone else mutters, "That ain't surgical." A medical examiner is called. When he arrives, he doesn't just confirm the cause of death. He points out the irregular cuts. Jagged, rushed, not anatomical, no scalpel precision, not someone with training. She used a saw, he says. Small, maybe a bread knife, but no experience. It's messy. The joints weren't separated right. Another cop checks the trunks themselves. They're old but sturdy. The kind you might find in a woman's bedroom closet. Inside the lining of one is a faint perfume smell. Lavender. He jots it down in his notes, even though it seems irrelevant. Then the police check the luggage tag. The name on it is W.R. Judd. Departure point, Phoenix, Arizona. Claim status, never picked up. Investigators radio Phoenix. No local address listed. No forwarding information. No one matching that name has come forward. And the woman who checked the trunks, she's gone. And then everything changes. The police notify the press immediately. They know this one won't stay quiet long. Word's already starting to leak down the station platforms. Reporters from the Los Angeles Examiner and the Times arrive within the hour. Flash bulbs pop as the trunks are wheeled into the back of a meat wagon. By nightfall, the station is flooded with more than just press. Confusion is thick in the air. One officer mutters, "She couldn't have done this alone. Not 100-pound girl. That big trunk's got to be, 200 pounds? Another disagrees. She bought the ticket, signed the name. Maybe she snapped. Ever seen what a crazy woman can lift? A local reporter tosses out, "Any chance this is tied to narcotics? One of those gang killings. This town's full of them lately." No drugs, the officer replies, but maybe jealousy. 3 women, 1 man? You do the math. Someone points to the name stitched in the trunk lining. Again, it reads the same as the tag, W.R. Judd. They have a name, but no face. And here's what else they have. 2 women murdered, dismembered, shipped across state lines by another woman who has vanished. By sunset, the story is already making headlines in both California and Arizona. And back in Phoenix, a quiet bungalow on Brill Street is about to become the most infamous address in the state. Phoenix, Arizona, October 19, 1931. While Los Angeles was still reeling from the discovery at the train station, Phoenix police were already one step ahead. They had traced the luggage tags. They called every Judd in the city directory. And now, they stood outside a modest bungalow on Brill Street. They knocked. No answer. Then they broke the lock. The door swung open, and time seemed to stop. The smell hit first. Iron, rot, smoke, and something chemical. Not strong, but sharp. The kind of smell that settles into wood and never leaves. A house that tried to forget what happened. Inside, everything looked disturbingly normal. Furniture untouched. Curtains drawn. A dish in the sink. A room waiting for someone to come back. But the bedrooms hold another story. Because the mattress was soaked through with blood. You hear me? Soaked, not stained. It had pulled into the floorboards, on the closet wall. Bullet holes clustered tight. Too high for someone lying down. Too low for a warning shot. Someone had been cornered. The sheets were gone. A detective stepped out back and found the incinerator still warm. Inside, charred cloth, scorched buttons, a half-burned pillowcase clinging to the edge of the drum. Then someone remembered the neighbor who'd already come forward. I saw someone burning sheets and blankets back there on Saturday, before the police even showed. There were drag marks across the floor, parallel, faint. Just enough to suggest a body had been pulled, maybe 2. But still no murder weapon. No saw, no knife, no .25 caliber pistol. Just the blood. And it told them this. Anne LeRoi had been shot. 1 round, upper body. But Sammy Samuelson, her body was missing pieces. She'd been dismembered with surgical precision, in the words of the sheriff. Torso cleanly severed, limbs packed in layers. The scene was violent, but also meticulous. Panic and planning. Back inside, someone spotted an envelope on the desk, addressed to Mrs. Anne LeRoi. Not guest, not visitor. Anne had lived here. This was her home. And she had died in it. The Detectives noted bruising, 147 fresh marks later found on Winnie Ruth Judd's left hand and arm, consistent with the violent struggle. 5 witnesses from her job said they saw her come in Monday morning with that hand heavily bandaged. Her claim of self-defense wasn't just talk. It had physical receipts. But what confused detectives most were the missing mattresses. One was never found. The other discovered miles away, anonymously, showed no blood. And that raised the question, was Brill Street even the place where the murders happened, or just the cleanup site? By that night, the headlines were already catching up. Love triangle slain. Trunk killer still at large. Phoenix woman sought in grisly murder. And whispered under the surface, rumors about Jack Halloran. A powerful man, a connected man. One reporter said it plainly. Some say Halloran had bigger muscle behind this than she did. By sundown, Brill Street wasn't just a crime scene. It was a statement. 2 women were dead. The killer was missing. And the city was no longer quiet. Three days after discovery, at the Los Angeles train station, they found her. Winnie Ruth Judd was checked in under a false name at a small hospital near La Crescenta. Like we said before in segment 2, her left hand was swollen and it was wrapped in gauze, badly infected. Doctors noted deep lacerations, consistent with a struggle, not an accident. And as we mentioned before, there were 5 different witnesses who would later confirm she showed up to work with that same hand heavily bandaged. But when the cops came and found her in the hospital, she didn't run. She didn't fight. She simply looked up and said, "I knew you'd find me." The officers read her rights. And then she started to talk. "I didn't want to kill anyone," she said, "but they were going to kill me." She painted a scene of chaos and fear. According to her story, Anne had a gun. They'd been arguing again about Jack, about jealousy, about who he really loved. When he said Anne pulled the trigger first, missed. Then Sammy lunged at her with scissors. When he said she panicked, grabbed for the gun, and fired. One shot hit Anne. Sammy kept coming, so she shot again. She didn't remember how many times. She just remembered the sound and the silence that followed. But that wasn't the end. Winnie said she didn't know what to do. So she called the only person she trusted, the man at the center of it all, Jack Halloran. "I told him what happened," she said. "He said, I'll come right over." What came next sounded more like damage control than panic. When he said Jack brought boxes, rope, sheets. They wrapped the bodies. They cleaned the house. They burned what they could. They carried the trunks. They loaded her onto the train. Her brother later recalled, "She told me to take those trunks and dump them in the ocean and not to ask any questions. And then he told me to go, that he'd take care of the rest." The detectives listened, wrote everything down. But one doctor who examined her would later claim she said that she would lie at the trial if it were necessary. And there was one other problem. Jack Halloran's name wasn't in the papers. Not yet. Not anywhere. Winnie had given it up freely. And suddenly, the story wasn't just about a jealous woman or a self-defense claim. It was about power, status, protection. Jack Halloran wasn't just a name. He was a businessman, a married man, a man with friends in high places. Winnie was accused of murder. Jack hadn't even been questioned. And as the news wires buzzed with phrases like trunk murderess and love triangle homicide, one thing became clear. This story was about more than murder. It was about who gets believed and who gets erased. Three days after the arrest, the facts start to pull against the story. And the first cracks appear where the science lives, in the autopsy room. The bullet that killed Sammy was fired post-mortem. That much is clear. She'd been shot, yes, but only after she was dead. And the dismemberment, surgical precision, said Sheriff McFadden. It had to be done by a professional, a surgeon, or a doctor. Ruth wasn't capable of doing it. Winnie was 5 feet tall, barely 100 pounds. Left hand wrapped in gauze, swollen and infected when she was found. And yet her confession asks us to believe that she not only killed 2 grown women, but dragged their bodies, lifted them into trunks, and cleanly severed Sammy's torso and limbs without leaving a trace of hesitation in the cuts. That's not panic, that's practiced. And then there were the scissors. Winnie claimed Sammy lunged at her with them. But when police recovered the pair from the Brill Street house, there were no fingerprints. None. No sign that they'd been in a struggle. No blood. No skin oils. Nothing. Anne, she said, had the gun. That Anne first fired and missed. But the autopsy said otherwise, because there was no gunpowder residue on Anne's hands. No trajectory evidence consistent with return fire. Anne had not fired a weapon. And the blood? Sheriff's Captain Hugh Ennis would later say, there just wasn't enough blood in that bedroom. You don't kill somebody, especially shooting them in the head without a lot of blood. The implication was chilling. If Anne had been killed somewhere else, what had really happened in that house? Now, let's not forget that earlier in this episode, we spoke about the examiner in Los Angeles, the medical examiner, who called the cuts jagged like a butcher's. But then later, the Phoenix sheriff claimed that the cuts were surgical. So which is it? A frantic cover-up or planned disposal by someone who knew exactly what they were doing? Reporters were already calling the story sensational, but detectives were quietly disturbed. One told a local paper off record, nothing about this is adding up the way it should. And then we keep coming back to, then there was Jack Halloran. In Winnie's first telling, Jack helped her. He showed up, He brought boxes. He packed the bodies. He loaded her onto the train. But by the time detectives circled back for a second interview, the story had changed. Slightly. Then more. A third confession contradicted the second. In one, she says Jack carried the trunks. In another, she says he merely suggested what to do. And in 1933, in a private letter, Winnie confessed she acted alone. I planned the murders. I executed them. Jack didn't help me. I lied to protect myself. The contradictions weren't subtle. They were strategic. One version made her a panicked woman fighting for her life. Another made her a cold, calculated killer. Another made her a woman trapped between loyalty and fear. But every time the story changed, one question got louder. Why protect Jack Halloran at all? He was married, wealthy, politically connected, a businessman with deep ties to the community. Some said his friends were the kind of men who could make things disappear. Evidence, reports, people. Captain Ennis put it bluntly. So much of this smacks of exactly what it probably was. Political interference. And through it all, the press barely mentioned him. He wasn't named in any of the early headlines. His presence was a rumor, a whisper. But the inconsistencies were stacking up. They weren't just holes in her story. They were clues. And what they pointed to was a version of events no one wanted to say aloud. That maybe she didn't act alone. Or worse, that maybe she never had a chance to. It started with the whisper in the LA station. By the time the second trunk was open, it was a roar. The first headline was clinical. Trunk with woman's body found. A fluke, maybe. A mystery in transit. Then the second story broke. Another woman inside. Now it was national. A double murder. Women. Dismemberment. Trunks. The details were grotesque, but they traveled fast. Winnie Ruth Judd's name appeared in the papers just 3 days later. Her photo followed soon after. Grainy, black and white, but unmistakable. She wore a brown suit, looked tired, small, ordinary, maybe even frightened. She didn't look like a killer. That made her even more interesting. The media seized on the contradictions. The Los Angeles Examiner ran with the trunk murderess, petite and polite. Another paper called her the sweet slayer. Reporters took turns describing her demeanor, polite, soft-spoken, delicate. She's no bigger than a child, one columnist wrote. And yet, those trunks. No one called her calculated. No one called her cold-blooded. She was either a victim or unhinged. The press didn't know where to place her, and that made her the perfect story. In an era when women were either saints or sinners, Winnie became both. Some headlines leaned into madness. Was it love or lunacy? Others framed her beauty against the horror. Angel face, devil's deed. She wasn't just a woman accused of murder. She was the character they could shape. Her looks, her fragility, her fashion. Every detail was turned into a metaphor. Reporters didn't call her a killer. They called her pretty. They called her pale. They called her polite. And they suggested again and again that maybe she had simply gone insane. But while America argued over her sanity, Phoenix police and the district attorney were preparing to make her something else entirely, a defendant. And soon, she'd be on trial for her life. Before she steps into a courtroom, the trial has already begun. Not in front of a judge, not with exhibits, but in the papers. Just like we talked about on the front page. And on the faces of people crowding the streets outside the jail. The way the reporters would describe her, not by her alleged crimes, but by her posture, her hands, her eyes. The things they wrote about her. The trunk murderess. A wisp of a woman, delicate, pretty, maybe disturbed. One columnist wrote she wore a brown suit, slightly wrinkled, with matching shoes. Her voice was soft, but you could feel something coiled beneath it. No one mentions the .25 caliber pistol, or the missing saw, or Jack Halloran. Instead, they speculate. Did she dance around in the blood? Did she sleep beside the trunks? Why didn't she cry? Even before the psychiatrists are called in, the whispers start. She must be insane. No sane woman could do what she did. The jail gets mail, some with prayers, some with poems. A few ask for her autograph. Others ask if she still has the dress she wore when she killed them. If you're picking up on anything that I'm saying, then what you're hearing is that the truth is getting crowded out. Winnie's words are no longer enough to shape her story. The press has taken it over, and they're painting their own version. Meanwhile, Jack Halloran remains untouched still. Not a headline, not a photograph. Just the man behind the curtain watching it all unfold. And Winnie, she's no longer just a woman accused of murder. She's a mystery, a metaphor, a warning. The evidence wasn't all in. The trial hadn't started. But in the court of public opinion, Winnie Ruth Judd was already sentenced. You've been listening to a production of Sidney Smith Creative, LLC, and You Hear Good Things Podcast Network, all rights reserved. For more true crime stories that stay with you, follow Murderous Podcast on your favorite platform and join the community on Patreon for early access, bonus content, and deeper cuts. So what do you make of this part? How did part 2 hit you? Was it desperation? A slow unraveling? Or something colder? Planned, calculated, with help from someone who knew how to stay out of the frame. We're heading into the trial next, but the performance has already started. Let me know what stuck with you. Leave a review on Apple or CastBox. Follow the show on Spotify, or iHeart so you never miss a Thursday drop. And if this one left you unsettled, go ahead and send me a DM. The link's in the episode description. You are the quiet jury, and your verdict matters. On air sources, The Trunk Murderess, Winnie Ruth Judd, by Jana Bommersbach. Trial transcripts from the Arizona State Archives. Original coverage from the Arizona Republic and Phoenix Gazette, 1931 to 1933. Oral histories collected by the Arizona Historical Society. Police records and post-arrest statements from Phoenix Police Department archives. Private correspondence excerpts preserved in the Halloran family collection. Psychiatric evaluation notes and parole board filings, 1940s to the 1960s. Retrospective analysis published by Arizona Highways and True Crime Magazine. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious.